Wait, what?
What?
What are you talking about? The parties you ran for the Wu-Tang Clan?
It's the weird life that I live, Kristen.
I love your life though. Well, I
So,
told you my husband is friends with the Beastie Boys and would go on tour with them and had a
okay,
whole life in music. And
amazing.
there's in his office, there's a bunch of gold records with Nas and I don't know, all these recording artists he worked with. So I feel like there's a there's like a meeting of the minds here in a weird way. Like you have to
Oh
meet
my
my
God.
husband.
Well, if I don't know, I've got to figure out what to do with this. So the Wu-Tang Clan had their 25th anniversary tour, part of which here in Australia, they had four sold out shows at the Opera House in Sydney.
Awesome.
And so there was a breakdown with regards to their after party, the official after party, and the venue cancelled and didn't want to deal with the person who was putting it together. And so what happened? The film crew that was supposed to be coming with her to Australia were filming a fitness expert in LA. This fitness
Okay.
expert in LA, and she was from herself, New York. The fitness expert just happened to be Antonio's ex-partner. And so
What?
sharing with her the breakdown, and she says, my ex-boyfriend's best mate in Sydney, this is not his thing, but he just seems to be able to figure stuff out. So why don't you call him and see if he can help? So they contacted me, and then I said, yeah, put it in my hands. I'll work it out. So
Meaning you're going to create the space for the Wu-Tang Clan's party?
yeah.
I
Well,
didn't know you had like party planner on your
I do
resume.
not. I do not, Kristen, but this is part of my, I
It's
don't
the
know,
beauty of being you and all
genius.
of the dimensions of who you are.
I
So
just
when
know
when did this
people.
happen, by the
This
way?
was like 6 years ago, uh,
Okay, that's
end
not
of
long ago.
end of 2018. So I literally dropped my daughter off to school that morning and then go to a cafe nearby, and I just sat on my laptop and I was going through my network. Who do I know? And I was just ringing people, and anyone that said, what's the budget, or that they had some opinion or judgment about not enough time, I just
Right.
hung up on them and dialed the next person. I had a limited amount of time to sort this out, right? So then I get hold of someone who goes, "Oh yeah, yeah, we can help. We can do this." So I was like, "Great." And I just built this team, and then we made it happen. We ran not one party, but two. And
Oh my God.
and then I
How was
thought,
how was I not invited to this party?
yeah, I felt like
I
I wasn't
know.
invited. I was
Yeah.
too
You were
thrilled to be
too
hanging
in
out with the
it.
Wu-Tang. And so
Right.
then I thought it can't just be about some gangster rappers getting drunk and whatever. And so I went to a buddy of mine
An
who
art
still
gallery.
owns an Indigenous art gallery.
Yeah.
And I shared this idea, this vision I had. And he said, I can't just give you a painting. I'm like, sure you can. Why not? So
Or you could say, "Can you just lend me one for a night?"
oh, no. So he goes, just pick one, right? So this one spoke to me. I don't know why. And guess what it's called? Songlines.
No.
Yeah.
No. So he gifted that to you for the party. I love the colors. It
Yeah.
does speak to sort of the
Now I
dimensions of
looked
your
up some
personality.
famous Indigenous artist, and I looked up like songlines. What does that mean? And it's a bit convoluted. I couldn't quite figure out exactly what it means, and which is probably, a good thing. But from what I could gather, it's kind of like the First Nations people would almost sing their journey, like that basically speak their
Oh,
journey, and then they would traverse that journey, and they would remember the journey via song. And anyway, so I bring this painting to the party, the second party, and no one cared. It was kind of like a nice piece that looked good. And at some point, it's like so late at night, I got frustrated. I'm like, no one's giving me or this any attention. So I grabbed this and I walked downstairs and I pushed through the security into the VIP area where the Wu-Tang are just hanging. Now, I hosted the party, so I had them drinking. I had the wine doctor, the resveratrol
They
enhanced
came.
wine.
Yes, that was at the
Oh,
party.
they were drinking the wine. So
The
I'm
Wu-Tang
speaking,
Clan were drinking the resveratrol enhanced wine. And
yeah,
then,
because
so you come up to them with this big painting in tow.
yeah. And because I had them drinking the wine, and I'm like, you guys maybe aren't so gangster these days. You're in your 40s and you're probably concerned about heart disease and your achy joints. Let me tell you about this wine. So, you know, you God
There's
was like,
always a learning opportunity, right?
exactly. You God's like, respect, brother. So
Oh my
anyway, I
God.
put this painting in front of one of them, and I didn't know. I'm like, are you one of the clan members? And he's like, yeah. So he signs it, and I said, I've got this vision,
What?
got this idea. So he signed, and then he helped me get everybody's signature. It's on the back of the painting.
Are you kidding me? The whole Wu-Tang Clan signed your painting.
Yeah,
This
everyone.
beautiful painting that was gifted to you for this party. Oh my God, this amazing.
So
That's amazing.
we'll do some good with it. I'd really love to
It,
impact the younger Indigenous generation, and how can we contribute to them? And I have all these ideas, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna hold on to this for a bit, and my life's going to go in a direction where I can maximize the opportunity that this is to have an even bigger contribution at some point. So,
well, of course, I have an idea of what you could do with it, but I think it still could be under wraps, right? Given
yes,
your various business ventures. So I will keep that between us. But
yes.
I do have a vision for it. And by the way, as I look at it, right, as a neuroscientist, I'm looking at it looks like these long, like dendrites with little arborizations coming off of it. So it gives me, it just reminds me of the days of working in cell culture and looking at
Oh my
how
God.
neurons communicate with one another. So this is, if it's a Rorschach test, like this is what is coming to mind for me.
Oh wow. Okay.
And it makes me smile. It makes me
If
smile.
it's a what test?
A Rorschach test.
What's
So,
that?
psychologists would use that, right? You'd see these ink blots and they'd ask their patients, what do you see when you're looking at these sort of blots of ink? What
Oh
comes to
yes.
mind? And it's supposed to give you an indication of what's going on in their subconscious mind and how they're feeling.
Okay.
So you could use that as a Rorschach test.
Yeah. Wow.
Well,
Wow.
I don't know if you asked the Wu-Tang Clan while they were drinking the resveratrol enhanced wine what they thought of this piece of art, but at least you had the presence, or somebody did, to have them sign the back, which is so
Yeah.
cool.
So,
Yeah.
Kristen Willeumier, author of Biohack Your Brain.
Aw.
How do you go from growing up in a house with pottery in the garage and uh, uh, weaving and all this artistic environment to being one of the world's leading neurobiologists? And
Oh,
what
you
is,
are
look deeply, what is the relationship? What is that connection?
between the art and the science. Well, I will tell you before I get into that story, when I used to work in a laboratory setting over at UCLA and Cedars, and I would dissect the brains of rats and mice and culture these beautiful neurons and help them grow. Um, I used to look at these beautiful neurons as works of art. And we'd put, fluorescent markers in them, if we were studying different genes to see what genes were being expressed in cells. So you could see cells that were expressed as green or red fluorescence, and they were exquisite. And I used to just marvel at my time, spending 8 hours or 10 hours in a confocal microscope room by myself in the dark with these neurons, but looking at them and really appreciating their beauty and their elegance and the fine details that I was able to see. And I think growing up in an artistic household, I just appreciated that.
Mm.
Um, Even the process of, if we put pesticides in that dish of neurons and cause them to explode, right? You even watch the process of death. So the process of growth and synaptic plasticity and dendritic arborization, like I'm looking at that painting of you, behind you, and then the process of destruction.
Mm.
And again, coming from that sort of artistic background and appreciation of art, I used to always think, oh, these images that we're taking would look so beautiful, hanging up on the wall and backlit. Like I just used to think about not just the experiments we were doing, but the the art of science, right? The artistry there. So yeah, that's
That was
one
so
way.
long ago because you're so old
I'm
now.
old. That
That you,
was honestly, that was 25, 30 years ago, which
yeah.
it's funny to like look back and go, oh my God, that's when I was doing laboratory work. But so how did I get from, you know, having a mom who's an artist, a father who's,
By the way,
yeah,
can I ask, does your mum, because these scientific images of cells,
yeah,
culture, etc., or even
yeah,
cross-sectional pieces of human tissue, etc., it's a big thing now. It's like
it's
the art
well,
of that gets displayed. Does your mum have a piece in her place of something that you've produced from the lab?
not from the lab. Well,
There's,
and now
there's-
my and now my mom is passed,
oh,
unfortunately.
I'm sorry.
She
Yes.
she had Waldenstrom's lymphoma, so a very
Uh,
rare form of cancer, a genetic form of cancer
when
that
did she pass?
she passed in 2014.
Oh, gotcha.
I
10 years.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like a really long time ago. And I wish I knew you given the work that you're doing in the field
Yeah.
of cancer. Yeah, that was really tough.
Well, cheers to our moms.
Yeah, cheers to our moms. Cheers, I know, with your mom as well. The like the pieces of art that my mom had in the house were like a little dragon ashtray I made her when I was young. I mean, I'm laughing, or these pieces that I did from the Art Institute. And I will tell you, when I was living in LA in Brentwood, um, I did take some art classes at her urging. And of course, what do I draw? Like pictures of skulls. Like they actually brought a skull into the class, and I drew a beautiful, just pencil, like drawing of the skull. And they liked it so much they hung it up in the Brentwood Art Center, and I've never gotten it back. So I like to think that I probably did a job. Um, but yeah, no, my mom never had any pictures of the neurons that I took in the lab at UCLA. Those are gorgeous images, and they've been on, in articles, right, in the Journal of Neuroscience, where scientists can. But now, I mean, we're really entering a time and space where I think neuroscience has really entered the collective consciousness on multiple levels. I mean, now young people want to become neuroscientists. They actually understand what they do. 25 years ago, people didn't really understand what a neuroscientist was or does, but I think with the internet, people are really excited about the brain and brain health and neuroplasticity, right? And and longevity and health and wellness. So yeah, I will say it's beautiful to sort of see this renaissance of people really loving the field that we're in, you and I, sort of collectively.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it's become accessible. So with
yeah,
distinctions, so when the distinctions allow for accessibility to a phenomena, then new possibilities open up. And it's gone from this anatomical just piece of fat that sat in a skull and it was so
right,
mysterious. And then those that knew something about it used all of these Latin terms to describe these convoluted anatomical and sort of abstract structures that and assign functions to parts of the brain, and it's near impossible to memorize all of that stuff.
right. The
And
Brodmann areas, exactly.
right, and
Do you remember neuroanatomy when we'd have to go in?
I suck at
Very
all.
quickly, like you'd see where all the little pins were, and you'd have to very quickly remember what structure that was. And you're going, oh my God, we've just got to stuff our brains full of all of this information. It
Yeah,
feels so much more accessible and practical. And I think it's because, people know what the amygdala is, or the hippocampus, or the prefrontal cortex. It's beautiful to see.
yeah,
And I think we're going to see really rapid acceleration in discovery just in the field of neuroscience across so many platforms because there's so much engagement. And we're even seeing, I mean, young people talk about mental health. I know you and I are like relics now, but back when I back when I was in college, I laugh because I tell people I brought a typewriter to college with me, and that just illustrates like how old I am. Do, 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 do. You bring your typewriter. Um, but it's just like I'm so excited to see. Oh, I was going to make a point about mental health. Back when I was in college, high school and college, nobody talked about mental health issues, anxiety, depression, ADD. I mean, ADD a little bit, OCD. And now I feel like the entire, generation of teens and young adults are familiar with the terminology, and they're learning about the networks that are involved in it, and they're learning practical tools that they can use to manage their emotions, and they're learning about the new technologies that are available, phytobiomodulation and the neurofeedback, and they're just so it's so exciting to see this in the hands of young people. And I can only imagine when we're doing this podcast 30 years from now, where the discoveries will have taken us,
yeah. It
right?
it is exciting. I tell you
Mhm.
what is also really interesting for me is the various interfaces and collapses of distinct conversational domains. And
Yes.
and what are the defining boundaries of each of these conversational domains? And you've got the conversational domain of neuroscience and then cognitive
Yes.
research, and they're distinct. And then there's psychology, and that's distinct. And you hear people collapsing these conversational domains and kind of getting themselves a bit stuck and creating metaphors that limit our thinking, planning, and acting, and hence why there's no real breakthroughs, even though we learn more and more and more. How come there's no real breakthroughs in effectiveness and the human experience and the ability to have compassion and work with each
Mm.
other, right?
Well, that's
Anything
the
to say about
silo,
all of
right?
that?
All, yeah, there. Well, it just reminds me being trained in academia. I mean, when you become an expert in the field, you sometimes work in a very siloed area, right? Whether it's, I was working in neurogenetics for a while and it was all about genes and gene therapies. And then, I moved over into physiological science and neurophysiology, and I worked in neurophysiology. So it was about patch clamp recordings and, electrical activity at the synapse. And then I worked in psychiatry using neuroimaging and functional imaging. So it's what's beautiful about it is like there's all of these different disciplines. And I think you and I are probably lucky because we have a foot in many of them just based on our educational experience. But I would say it's okay that they're siloed, and it's nice. I think with the internet, we're able to learn from one another. Like one of my friends, who's a brilliant professor at University of Calgary, he is a mathematician. So he's into mathematics and what is it, what is it called now? He does mathematical modeling of neurons and neuronal circuits. So he and I have these rich dialogues about computational neuroscience and how mathematicians and physicists are looking at the same kind of structures I'm looking at, right? And
Mm,
they're building things and computer chips and trying to build these networks using computer modeling principles. And of course, I'm a neurobiologist, right? I've studied the brain at the level of the single cell in rats and mice, and then I've worked with humans and human brains in many forms of brain imaging. And it's for me, it's nice because I'm thinking about what happens in the real human being, but then I'm listening to these computational scientists and mathematicians trying to create these models, and how do models explain what happens in the brain. And the dialogue is fascinating because they have a certain perspective and I have a certain perspective, and you try to bring them together, and then how does this advance science, right? How do we use this computer modeling to understand the 86 billion neurons in the brain, and with every neuron potentially making up to 10,000 connections with another, with other neurons. It's just, I mean, we have this extraordinary complex organ that's in our head, and we're all, I think, collectively coming together, all these different silos, to try and really advance our knowledge in these fields. And that's the exciting part for me. So you're right. You want to have experts that are siloed because you want the people that have subject level mastery of those very specific areas. And then you bring us all together as a think tank collective, and that's where the genius comes,
Yeah.
right? That's it's really where the brilliance happens. So in answer to your question, I think there's a beauty in all of it, right? There's a beauty sometimes in the siloed learning, so people get really knowledgeable, say on a specific gene or a specific receptor in the brain, right? Because neuroscience can be that. Your work may be studying, how a single receptor works, right? In a cell membrane. And that's your life's work.
Yeah.
That's what's very humbling about being a neurobiologist, and watching like how some of my mentors and people in the field, studied in aplesia, or these, animal models. And maybe to most normal people, that's not sexy, but they've advanced what synaptic plasticity is, and long-term plasticity, and learning, and neurons that fire together, wire together. But they're the Nobel laureates. They're the people that actually explain the mechanisms behind how we learn.
Yes.
That's just so cool. I think I'm just endlessly excited about learning like you. And I'm really excited and heartened to see so many people love neuroscience right now. And I'm just, you've got AI, you've got neuroscience, you've got computer modeling, you've got Neuralink, people putting chips in the brain that are going to try to help people who, have ALS or quadriplegic be able to regain function again of their body, and the connection of the body and the brain. I mean, there's just so many amazing things going on in our field.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, your book is really a quantum leap. I mean, it's not just your book, the
Oh,
whole field of it, because to biohack your brain, you're essentially saying that you too, whatever the you is,
yes.
can have access to that chunk of fat in your skull that seemingly determines and controls everything. Whereas prior to this era, we really were at the effect of this thing in our head. For example, you mentioned the amygdala earlier. So, a really simple example of to what degree you don't have a say. It's
Right?
whenever we argue, you get in an argument, you've even forgotten what the heck you're arguing about. You just know you have to win, right? And
It's
and
the
you keep
bail
going.
brain.
And logically, it's not going to go well. Like at some point in the aftermath, you're going to have to clean this mess up, but you keep going. Or sometimes your reaction to something happening is completely disproportionate to what was actually happening. And then
Right.
you got to come back and clean it up and say, I'm sorry, it wasn't about you, or reacting to something from my past. You just reminded me of my dad, or whatever it was.
Yes.
That's the amygdala hijacking, like your midbrain, or, in the olden days, they'd say reptilian brain,
Yes.
hijacking everything. And that's the degree to which you just don't have an immediate say. And then now you're saying, no, we can hack these mechanisms, these
Yes.
evolutionary pathways, and we can actually go to work on developing a brain that works for us versus us always being at the effect of the unfathomable number of synaptic connections.
Yeah, I mean, and your example is a beautiful one at that, because what is one of the greatest gifts? Learning the ability to regulate your emotions, because that will preserve many of your relationships. You know, as one gets older and learns, we do get triggered by things, right? We just have these subconscious triggers that could initiate these feelings of rage, anger, or again, say we're a police officer, a firefighter, a military veteran, where day after day, you're putting yourself in danger or harm's way. So that amygdala is firing when it sees these stressful situations, and it's connected to your hippocampus, which stores the memory, and it connects to the things you're seeing and smelling, right? All the sensory experiences around it. So we have, large swaths of our population that have been exposed to trauma, that have the amygdala that are overactive. And now, how does one live their life peacefully with this happening? It's like your brain has hijacked your ability to live a life that maybe you really want to live. And now we have technologies to, number one, see what's going on in the brain. So we can actually see if your amygdala is overactive. We can do that with functional imaging. We can see it with electrical imaging. We now have we have got medications, we've got supplements, we've got behavioral strategies. And of course, my love, and I know you know this, we have targeted neurofeedback that can actually get down to the subcortical levels where your amygdala is, and we can retrain your brain networks to be quieter. And it's just like we go to the gym, right? And if we want to get strong abs, you don't just go to the gym and do 100 sit-ups and you automatically have strong abs, but you do the work, right? You go in and do a consistent number of these, sort of the retraining of these networks. And what's beautiful is we can train the brain so that they get stabilized, so that they're quieter, and you will be less reactive. And these approaches are non-pharmacological, right? There's no side effects except feeling better. And to me, that's revolutionary. I'm so heartened to be at the sort of the mid stage of my career, because as you and I have talked, like I see, I've got another good 30 years to watch how this research unfolds and helps millions of people who struggle with these reactive patterns, that maybe they don't want to be on the pharmacological, medications. Maybe, a lot of those have side effects, because I've worked in psychiatry. So we know medications are needed for certain people, but what if we could bring the dosage down and use some of these other therapies as adjuncts to help calm that amygdala down? And yes, that's one example of biohacking. And it's amazing.
Yes.
And I know you know about this, don't you?
I love it. I love it. I love so all these tools, these combinatorial approaches to optimize biology and longevity. Really, what I'm mostly interested is exactly what you just pointed to, which is the opportunity, the profound opportunity to have peace of mind,
Yes.
to experience one's own power. And if I could contribute anything when I get to work with our clients or I educate people, people get fascinated with the science and all the
Yes.
details and these distinctions and they can start to join the dots between these abstract phenomena that we write about and get published in journals and other geeks read.
Right.
But how do I apply this to my life and what I'm dealing with in my struggles, in my challenges, and also the fulfillment of my wants and dreams? And at the very base of it all, if I can just have people get for themselves, there's nothing wrong with them.
Right. There's no, number one, there's nothing wrong with them. Number two, we, and you and I have talked about this. Sometimes we inherit, a neurobiological hardwiring from our parents, our grandparents, right? And I tell people, your brain is unique. and we are always going to work with your strengths, right? I had a godfather who was bipolar, and bipolar disorder is something he had to live with his entire life. But some of the bipolar people I've worked with are the most creative, innovative business people. Their minds go fast, right? They can be very efficient. They love their manic state. The hypomanic state, not so good. But the fact that we can work with the way your brain is wired, and we have the imaging technologies to, number one, sort of destigmatize mental illness and say, here's your brain's wiring. And then you can give somebody a very practical approach, using all of the technologies we have available, the supplements and medications and dietary and lifestyle modifications. Because as you and I know, even the foods we eat impact our mental health. And so we have a lot of opportunities to sort of understand how our brain is wired and then play to its strengths and
Yes.
turn, I kind of always say, turn the dial down on, some of the areas that we know we could do better, right? I think we're always, every one of us listening, we know we can be better. We all have our off days. Um, I do my best because I work with so many people with psychiatric and neurological issues. I work very thoughtfully on staying balanced, emotionally balanced, cognitively balanced, very peaceful, very present for the people I work with, very compassionate and connected to their unique struggles. And I'm here to lend the hand, much like you are, right? We see people's struggles. Both my father passed with Parkinson's, my mother passed with cancer. And, life's journey is filled with ups and downs and emotional struggles and changes in cognitive function. But I think people like you and I are really here to help hold people's hands and give them sort of the most cutting edge solutions that are possible to stay balanced and
Mm.
to be able to handle like the ups and downs of life, and to know that you're not alone in your struggles and that your brain can change, right? Your brain can always change. There's neuroplasticity, neurogenesis. We've seen it with the imaging. I wrote the book Biohack Your Brain because I have literally seen extraordinary things that can happen in your brain, the changes that can be made and be observed visually using
Mm.
functional imaging. And there's no greater proof than actually seeing your brain image change and having that, and being able to post that on your chalkboard or your refrigerator. I mean, I'm heartened to see what is possible in terms of changing the brain, right? We've talked about hyperbaric oxygen therapy can regrow new blood vessels in the brain and restore perfusion and oxygen and help to maintain those cells that could have normally died. That alone is revolutionary. That
Yeah.
alone. I mean, I feel like we're just scratching the surface at what is possible. We've got photobiomodulation now, which, everybody's into doing the red light therapies, but, we're investigating its effects on the brain and being able to get through the skull and help people who have, dementia and neurological disorders. So, I mean, just looking at the technologies we have and what's going to be possible is so exciting.
Yes. Yes. A few years ago, I rang Joe, Professor
Mhm.
Joe Maroon. I had this kind of thinking around maybe why my approach was so effective. So I coach clients. I bring what I call a biophenomenological approach to
I
help.
love that, by the way. Can you describe that for the audience? Because it's such a unique term that I
Yeah.
think is beautiful and really highlights how unique Simpler Health is and the model that you use.
Yeah, yeah. So the biology, obviously, you've got to develop distinctions. You've got to learn and study and be educated and have a curiosity towards these biological scientific distinctions. You got to know what the heck's in there, right? And this is all part of, when I say to people in the beginning, it's not your fault.
Right.
you're dealing with thousands of years of evolution. Your body was designed to put weight on. It wasn't designed to take it off so readily. You live in an environment that doesn't support you to be well, and it's like 45 years worth of misinformation, right?
Right.
So, but you are the only one that can do something about it. Okay. In the world of responsibility, the way that people experience it, it's always one of fault and blame. Either it's their
Right.
fault and they're to blame, and then you're just filled with anger and resentment, or it's I'm at fault and I'm to blame, and you've got guilt and just you make yourself small and meek, and the pendulum's always somewhere in between. I'm like, just that's one model of responsibility. That's not the
Right.
truth, right? Let's just put that
You're
whole
like, how is that working for you?
yeah, exactly.
How is that working for you? That's why you're sitting in front of me.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, when we talk about the biology, it's like, of course, however, you're a human being. And I like to access the being of human being
Yes.
from the conversational domain, not of neuroscience or biology or whatever, but from phenomenology, which is the study of the relationship between phenomena. So you're a phenomena, life is a phenomena, your future is a phenomena, your health is a phenomena, and there's some relationship that is constituted in the way in which we speak, the way in which we articulate the phenomena that we're dealing with. And the more powerfully one can articulate something. So, for example, this phenomena
Yes.
is very powerfully articulated in my hand. It's,
Yes.
in reality, it's not in my hand. What's in my hand is bones and blood vessels and muscles and so forth. So it's kind of outside of me. So where one as a human being experiences life is out here,
Right.
not in here, right? So where I see you is not in here. Where I see you is where you are.
Right.
There. So if I am here and you are there, how can I experience seeing you there? It doesn't make sense. So maybe that separation of I am here, you are there isn't true. Now, this is a bit of a mind bend because you have to start, well, hang on, maybe I am not limited by this skin bag.
Right.
Maybe who I like, the you that we speak of, the self, where is that? It's out here in life. And human beings, the being of a human being is designed to be out here in the world, right?
It is.
And that's why the phenomena of well-being is the
Yes.
fulfillment of the possibility of being well,
Wow.
not just you, but if you're committed to being well, you would be concerned for the well-being of others, right?
I love that you incorporate that into your approach. And
Otherwise,
it's a you.
you're always, after reproductive years, everything's supposed to break down. You're not supposed to be healthy. Or, I mean, it's such a disempowering context to be that you are supposed to be healthy. You're not. It's entropy. The universe is always breaking down. But that's the
Yeah.
game.
But that's the game, because if you look at nature and the cycles of nature, right? Things grow and they break down. I mean, I like to tell people, you know, we're going through this concept now of aging as a disease. And I get concerned because I think words have power.
Yes.
And I never want people to think of aging as a disease. I actually think of getting older, I'm getting wiser, right? I've done experiments, I've experienced life, I'm getting wiser, and I embrace getting older, and I also embrace the changes that come with it, and I honor my body and my brain. And right as we get older, we shift accordingly, right? We might need to get more sleep, right? We might need to change the way we exercise. We're not doing 2 hours of HIIT training. We've shifted, and maybe we are, but if we have aches and pains in the body, it's all about sort of listening to where we are. And hey, you know, I've worked with enough pro athletes, right? As they get older, like nobody likes that aging body or brain, and that's why we get into that space of regenerative medicine and longevity. But to get back to your point of the biophenomenological approach, this what you are doing is so unique because you are not only giving people the accountability and the tools, because I already know how you train and how you do it, but this is that psychological, there's an approach there that I think is really revolutionary and transformative and impactful in helping people in how they view their world and the
Mm.
way they move through it and participate in it. And you have a way of helping people understand how to celebrate the victories and the appropriate timelines for success.
Yeah.
Um, and I so applaud you in that as somebody who's taught people how to lose weight and do it for their brain health for thousands of people. And the one thing I learned is accountability and education are important. And the education needs to be consistent, right? And but if you teach somebody appropriately, they will be able to maintain that for a lifetime.
Yeah.
So you and I know everybody jumped on Ozempic for the quick weight loss
Mm.
impacts. Um, but I always love to empower people to show them they could do it on their own without needing that. I understand some people need that or they need the jump start, but that's why we have Simpler Health and we have you, Dean Kilby, and your coaches and your approach to
Yes.
really help people attain that success and attain it quickly. Because knowing you for as long as I have, everybody listening, this is a man who is about success and he is going to make you leave your excuses at the door, right?
Well, it's interesting when people think quick fix and we'll go down the pharmacological route.
Right.
Our approach at Simpler Health generates the weight loss results 3 times faster than the clinical trials for the drugs have demonstrated. And in fact, Antonio, if you remember back in
Yeah,
the day, Antonio was scientific director of obesity for Novo Nordisk,
I
developing
know.
GLP-1 receptor agonists. And so he's just recently dropped using the Simpler Health protocols like 14 kg.
Yeah.
He's ripped now, like again. I'm like,
I mean, look, yeah, I've seen him. Like he looks amazing. But I like that because you and I lead by example, right?
mm,
I've always felt like I want to give you the non-pharmacological approach to brain health and body health, as do you. And there's an action piece, an accountability piece. And I think we're helping teach people how to get there because at least here in America, 2/3 of individuals are overweight or obese, and it's the number one way um, to accelerate. That just accelerates brain aging. We've published on it. We published in Nature Obesity a study looking at healthy individuals versus those that are overweight or obese and the functional imaging showed decreased perfusion in the prefrontal cortex, which is the most important part of your brain for higher level cognition, working memory, personality, inhibiting your responses to things appropriately. It is one of the most important parts of your brain, although every area of your brain is important.
yes,
So
everything is important. Yeah.
every area, because it's all interconnected, but this is just to illuminate the point that if people want to be brain healthy, the number have a healthy body mass index. It is so critical. This is why Simpler Health is so important. Like if you do nothing else, just to get to a healthy weight for your height. And if you're doing it by body mass index, I know you will be lean because as you and I both know, that's sort of toward being lean. But that's the best for your brain health. It
Yeah.
just is.
Yeah.
And if you can do it without medications, that's
Yeah.
the way I would recommend doing it. And I could say that because I've helped thousands of people like you lose weight, but I did it specifically to help people with their brain health. You're doing the whole body.
Well, I'm interested in what way is there health a limitation to the fulfillment of what they say they're committed to?
Oh, give me an example.
Yeah. So if you create a safe enough space, people will actually at some point start to share what they really want for themselves in their lives. They don't typically just divulge that information because there's all these inhibitions. They don't want to be judged. The voice in their head in the
Right.
next moment will say, oh, but that's not really true for me, etc. So if you create a safe enough space for people to actually have a say in the matter of what they really want, what they're really committed to, and if their health is a barrier to that, then I work with them to restoring health and vitality such that they can more easily fulfill on what they say they're committed to. I don't care if you die in a bigger coffin. It doesn't bother
Right.
me. It's like I don't lose sleep over somebody else's fat ass. That's the weight loss is like a secondary gain. What I'm mostly
Right.
concerned about is where does that impact your self-confidence, your freedom of movement, your energy levels, your ability to be present? How irritated are you at home with your loved ones? All of these types of things. And then mostly I love working with parents of young kids because I
Yeah.
know me and my team get to make a difference to those parents, then those
Yes.
children grow up in a better nutritional environment. Their brains will be better nourished. They grow
Yes.
up with better functioning brains that can then go solve the problems in the world that you and I created.
It's a, I know we got to take care of our future generations. And you're right. It starts with the parents because they're the ones that are feeding their kids. And this is where I have such compassion for, children who do struggle with the weight loss and maybe they're not able to make those choices. But I've already started, I've taught kids in inner city schools how to make good choices for their brain health. And you do it through role modeling, with some of the celebrity athletes. Like there's a really fun way you can educate kids to learn how to make great brain healthy choices. And trust me, I looked at my generation, at my parents' generation growing up. I mean, both of my parents were lean, and we had healthy meals in the house, but I think there's unique challenges with processed foods that we never had growing up, right?
Hmm.
The, a visit to McDonald's or fast foods when I was growing up was very limited, right? You had sort of the parents that served the well-balanced meal. Um, and now I think today with the onslaught of you've got GMOs and pesticides and hey, I learned 25 years ago when I put pesticides on neurons, they exploded. Their cell
Yeah.
bodies exploded. All I had to see was that visual and I was like, "Oh my God. No, nope, I'm organic for life. I'm organic for life. When I go shop and my husband knows this, if it's organic, I'm buying it. It's just, you know, those those choices made consistently over time are really what helps preserve your brain health. And you know this as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's both the avoidance of those toxins, right,
Yes,
which is important. And then there's also when the plants are not protected chemically,
right,
they have to develop and upregulate their own defense mechanisms,
right.
which then, say, if there's an increase in UV irradiation, or if you take, I mean, I like the wine. So if there's a moist vintage, then the grape,
Yes.
because there's a greater opportunity for a mold infestation. So the grape skin
Oh,
have a higher concentration of the polyphenol antioxidants, right, to protect them because
from the mold?
yeah, because there's
That's,
antimicrobial activity of those molecules.
I
So,
love this.
so when the plants
Curious. Yeah,
sense
yeah,
environmental stresses, then
yes,
that threaten their survival, they upregulate the amount of these molecules that then mammals come along and consume. And these
yes.
molecules signal our survival genes that allow us to better survive the environmental threat as well. So this,
It's the adaptogenic principle. Why
right?
people take rhodiola or ashwagandha or panax ginseng, right? All of those adaptogens, which you see Olympic athletes take. Do you remember like the Russian athletes, all the Olympic athletes really um, embraced adaptogens for that purpose, right? You take them into your body and your body can handle more stress because of it. So, but it's the whole, process of evolutionary biology. And we make it work to our advantage if we don't have as much, if we don't have to expose ourselves to those pesticides. Because have you ever seen a pesticide crop? Like, have you ever seen it sprayed on a crop?
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to tell you, I was in Hong Kong. I was giving a presentation at the Gordon Research Conference, and one of my lab mates came with me. And we were standing in line somewhere, and across the street was a field. I don't know if it had corn. I do not remember what they were growing, but there were like three guys in hazmat suits, like fully white hazmat suits. And the spraying was happening and it was all wafting. Oh, actually, I think we were at an amusement park. I'm not even kidding you, like a
Oh,
water park, some sort, because I do have a picture of us going to
wow.
some amusement park. And we're in the line and it's all wafting towards us and we can't even protect ourselves. And I was like, wow, that's what goes on our crops.
Mm.
And I understand why, right? I absolutely understand why. But if we think about the impact to human health, and probably because I've lost a father to Parkinson's, and I feel that his was very much environmentally mediated. He was a combat helicopter pilot in Vietnam. There's Agent Orange. He was a firefighter. He was a pilot for Pan Am jet fuels. I mean, trust me, he got the triple whammy when it came to toxic exposure. That was just a part of the occupational risk of those jobs. Um, and those occupational risks will be there, but the kind of research that we're doing, we're going to teach these populations, how do we help you to detoxify, right? How do we help you to get healthier? How can we use the technologies we have to help support your overall health and well-being? And that's what I love about your approach, right? Because again, you said it's whole body. It's let's do
Yeah. It's
whole body.
whole,
Let's
whole
look at
body
your
and whole human being.
whole
Yeah.
biophenomenological
Because,
approach.
yeah, because the context is decisive.
Yeah.
And, for those that don't understand, by the age of 6, we've got what, 100 billion neurons, and every neuron has hundreds to thousands of connections to
Hmm.
all the other neurons, and every neuron is either directly or indirectly connected to every other neuron. And so,
Yes.
like, the connections and the permutations is, as I said earlier, unfathomable. And, we can have somewhat of a say, but at some point, it's like when I had my head injury,
Yeah.
and thank you for supporting me through that recovery and that journey. And it was such a blessing and a gift because it enabled me to have an experience of that I otherwise wouldn't appreciate, and be able to now
Right.
have and generate compassion towards others that may be dealing with something like that, but also gave me an opportunity to figure out how to hack my recovery and
Yes.
speed that process up. And that was amazing. So I had a concussion, and then post-concussion syndrome, and then extreme lethargy, sort of anxiety, depression, spatial disorientation, emotional dysregulation, just a complete inability to interact with people. It was so energetically taxing. And
Yeah.
I just locked myself in my apartment. I had to reduce my workload to about a quarter or a third of what I was previously doing. And I watched Netflix and cried all the time, and
Oh,
just like I just couldn't do anything. And so what was brilliant was I went and saw Charlie Teo, who
yes.
had developed this, worked with a team, and they developed this software called Omniscient. And so we got my MRI, and it just takes
Yes.
the data from a standard MRI and puts it through this software. And he's looking at my brain, which maps the connectome. So
Yep.
we get somewhat of an insight as to, the sort of major information highways in the brain, and even the direction of the fluid, because the MRI can detect the fluid. And, he's looking at my brain. He's like asking me all these questions, and I'm like, what's going on? He goes, this is the most abnormal brain I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're an asshole. Don't say that.
You're like, wait a minute, where's the soft touch? Like, where's the compassion? In a way, he knows how to talk to you to make you get moving. Like, we got to take care of this
Oh my
now.
gosh. So my central executive network was
Yeah.
hyper connected to a degree he's never
Yeah.
seen before. And he's like, you're not schizophrenic, you're not ADHD. I'm like, maybe,
Yeah.
so anyway, that was kind of a bit upsetting for a period of time because there's something wrong with me. That's the automatic that our brain goes
I
to.
know. This is
Something
the
wrong.
this is the part where if we image your brain, you just have to walk in knowing like we can work on it. You've got to be okay with what we show you. And
And
that's
there's nothing wrong. It's like I remember driving, and then it just occurred to me, hang on a minute, I've got the brain that I've got, and
yes.
there's nothing wrong with me. Now let's learn how to drive this thing, right?
Yes. And it's always working to support you. That's the thing I remind people. And no matter how poorly you may have treated it, we can still help to restore and repair it at any age. And
That's
this
an
is what I've
important
seen.
thing that
This
you
is what
said.
I've
Yeah.
seen in the clinic. I mean, I've seen 80-year-olds and 90-year-olds be able to change their brain function. I mean, there's certain things we can't do, like if you have Parkinson's, we can't, certain things we cannot reverse. That's why we want people to start taking care of their brain health as early as possible and take it seriously. Don't wait till you've got a diagnosis to then deal with it. The smart person listening to the podcast is like, I'm going to get healthy. I'm going to be at a healthy weight. And why? It's like your brain is involved in everything you do. As you say, how you think, how you act, how you move, how you feel. Look, you had post-concussion syndrome, and it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible for anybody who's never experienced it. It is so debilitating, to have that brain fog and to feel like I have no energy and I can't focus and I cannot get my work done. And will this ever end? And I work with a lot of people where that is a question that can linger. For some people, those kind of things can linger for years,
Yes.
years after a
I
single.
was told the neuropsych said, Dean, this typically would take 18 months before you start feeling yourself again. And I'm like, I got too
I
many
don't have
balls
time.
today.
I don't have
The
time
hell
for
yeah,
18 months.
we gotta hack this thing. And for some reason though, Kristen, there was like light at the end of the tunnel.
Mhm.
I knew that I was going to get myself through this somehow. And that's all I needed was just that tiny bit. And
The
just
hope, you need the hope. That
yes.
is that is the piece that I realize most people, they don't know, or they don't know if they can believe it. Like, can my brain get better? I just had a TIA. I just had a stroke. Can it get better? Took this hit to the head. Do I have CTE? Right? Am I going to die? I mean, it's the questions around that. And my husband, being a Wharton Business School graduate, always tells me hope is not a strategy. Like, I kind of laugh because that is the male mantra, like hope is not a strategy.
Mm.
But the work that I've done and what I've seen in the clinical setting is nothing short of extraordinary in terms of what the brain is capable of in terms of restoration and repair from, like I said, growing new blood vessels. The brain can get reoxygenated. The brain can have more, that greater perfusion to areas where it's been gone. It can rewire. We can retrain those aberrant brain network, activity. Like your executive network was overactive, so there's ways we can teach your brain to train that down. And if you just look at examples like Stephen Hawking, I mean, there's many examples of people who have been up against extraordinary odds in terms of how their brain is functioning. Or HM, that story of, in neuroscience, the railway, he was working on the railway and had a tamping iron go through his prefrontal cortex and still lived. I mean, I always tell people, the brain has unlimited possibilities for regenerative capacity. And while, you know, traditional neurologist, like I'm very careful because, there's certain things we can't cure right now, right? We can't cure Parkinson's or we can't cure Alzheimer's. But I feel with the way the research is going and the advanced imaging and AI, being able to see and work with people in their brains at younger ages, or I don't know. I just feel like we're going to enter into a time when maybe some of these things we thought were incurable, if we address them soon enough, or we know, say you have Parkinson's and it's a genetic form, we now have CRISPR technology, or if you've got Alzheimer's disease and it's a mutation in presenilin 1 or 2, like technology to change, genes at that level. I just, I think there's just so much to be excited about. So just as full circle to your point, you had hope and you're like, I can do this. I want to accelerate my recovery. I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to do as much as possible. Not everybody's wired like you, but I know your wiring. So you did everything. And
Yeah.
I love that. I absolutely love and honor and respect um, your persistence. And, we need people like you speaking about it. Because
Mm.
I'm just working with a young boxer right now, very young guy, and he's got post-concussion syndrome like you. And he's so afraid his brain will never get better.
Yes.
And I see this so often. And he's in college and he's like,
Mm.
have I destroyed my brain forever as a boxer? Like every day I've got brain fog and I'm like, this can be better.
Yeah.
This can be better. So don't ever let how you're feeling today have that be the rest of your life, right? Stay
Mm.
open-minded and find the people that are innovating and pioneering in this space,
Exactly. Yeah.
right?
And don't go it alone. It's
Don't
like
go it alone. Yeah.
we're
Find your,
trying to be out here and you can play that game. And um, I'm had these knocks to my head. And yeah, I'll tell you what I did learn because I was getting the
tell me.
quantitative electroencephalographs
Yeah.
regularly, and I would send them
Yes.
through to you. And
I love it.
there was a time during the pandemic where, as a molecular virologist, that was my original training, and I was working with the Batman in Singapore, Professor
Yes.
Wang, and we were
Amazing.
developing assays and how to better define what does it mean to be immunoprotected, and
Yeah.
and it was really when so during my head injury recovery. I recovered to say 90%, and then I kind of slackened off on how diligent I was
Amazing.
behaving, and doing silly things. But anyway, and then I get COVID, and the actual infection wasn't much, but it was enough to trigger that inflammatory response that
Yes.
I experienced like a relapse
Yeah.
in my recovery, and it was so upsetting because I knew no one would have an answer for me.
Right.
And it was at that point I kind of went, maybe they don't, but that doesn't mean that there isn't an answer, right?
Yes.
And I can find that. I'm bloody well.
Yes.
Let me figure
And
it out.
anti-inflammatory diet, like,
Stacked everything,
yes.
right? And
Yes.
I within 3 weeks, Kristen, I was
You're
like
amazing.
100%. And I remember walking out of the center where I was, in the hyperbaric
Yeah.
oxygen, and
Yeah.
and I walk into a clothing store, and I'm just kind of looking, and I'm chatting to the staff member, and the interaction was great. And I walk out, and I just thought to myself, wow, that was easy. For the past
Yeah.
year and a bit, interacting with people was so draining, and I avoided it, and that just flowed. And I thought, I'm back. And in that week, I came up with the idea. I invented a way in which we could detect and measure functional immunity to COVID in the nasal mucosa, right? So
What?
I did
Okay,
that.
wait a
Yeah.
minute. I need this because I work with so many people,
Yeah.
and especially now, even with the boxer, I was like, have you had COVID? Right? What I now have to take that into consideration as an inflammatory
Yes.
response in the brain whenever anybody's also had a concussion and they're not getting better. And that's a very important piece here. And it's going
Yeah.
to be an important piece moving forward for quite some time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
I need
when
your,
you need antibodies against the virus,
yes,
but you need a subset of those antibodies because it's only a tiny percentage of the total binding antibodies that block the virus's ability to bind to our cells. So that
yes,
they're called neutralizing antibodies. But
yeah,
even if you've got them circulating in your blood, it doesn't prevent infection, right?
right,
And this has been the
right,
whole dilemma in kind of talking about immunoprotection, et cetera. So where you need them is at the point of viral entry. And
smart.
no one had a way of detecting.
Did you create something for
Yeah, it
the
was
name?
really a really simple experiment. I just did it on this table. One Thursday night, I was at home bored and I just had this idea. So I did the experiment because I had some of the tools with me. And I'm like, wow, that probably is the most important functional experiment I've ever done. So I
Did you
took
create an assay or did you actually
the
create a
assets
way
already
to protect?
existed. No one had applied them in this particular context. So, as I said earlier, context is decisive.
Yes,
And what
yes,
a scientist does is sees things that everybody else sees, but they can't, they think what nobody else has thought. And,
yes. That's
and
exactly
so
it. But the answer's always in front of you.
just there. So I
It's
took
there.
photos of this, I sent it to the Batman, and he rings me back and he's like, uh, so we've been trying to figure out how to do this for months, and you've just done it. So I said, what
So,
happens?
so wait a minute. Tell me, was it an assay? So I'm stuck on word. Did you actually create something that can help confer protection in the nasal mucosa, or was it
Oh
an
yeah,
assay?
yeah, I think so. So we did I then got to spearhead a, a international multi-center longitudinal clinical study where
Awesome.
this is in my spare time. So
In your spare time when you're not doing
what
art for
we
the Wu-Tang Clan.
determined, yeah, this was interesting. So what we determined was for those who had been vaccinated with
Yes.
breakthrough infection. So if you're
Yep.
vaccinated,
Yes.
whatever
Yes.
percentage had detectable neutralizing antibodies in their nasal mucosa. With a breakthrough infection, a much higher proportion of that cohort had neutralizing antibodies. Now,
Okay.
and we wrote this up and we published this in Scientific Reports, which is a Nature
Okay.
publication.
Yep.
No one gave a damn. It was like, I think it's a big deal.
It
But
is a big deal.
then in unpublished data, what I observed in even those that weren't vaccinated but had multiple infections, they
Yes.
still didn't have neutralizing antibodies in their nose. Now, what's the distinctions here? You need a pre-existing pool of B cells,
Yes.
then have antigen presentation in the nose. That's
Yeah.
when you develop functional immunity. Now,
Wow.
why don't those who have had even multiple infections have a high enough pre-existing pool of B cells? Well, the name of the virus is a misnomer. SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome, almost all infections were mild. So
Yeah.
your immunological response is proportionate to the disease
Oh,
symptomology.
okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So because it was mild, there weren't enough of the,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
yeah, so that this is fascinating and
Oh, that is fascinating.
yeah, yeah. But the to your point that the because it's here and the olfactory
Yes.
bulb
Yeah,
and the
yeah, yeah.
brain and
For it's the fastest way to get to the brain.
exactly,
You're not
yes.
wrong because I'm like, oh, if you could do something to confer like a nasal spray or something that would somehow
So if we
have
can correlate,
have
if we
like a
can,
protective, I feel
yes.
like you could do sort of a protective formulation that could be just sprayed in the nasal mucosa.
And I think my hypothesis is that there is a relationship between functional immunity there and
Yeah,
long COVID symptoms.
I I would agree with you. I mean, I love, and I had a very strong immune support protocol that I did during COVID just to stay healthy, and I've never gotten it. It's 4.5 years. My husband and I have not gotten it.
Yeah.
So I
Get
like to
out
think
sometime.
no. No, thank you. No,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, but that's also about being very vigilant, and probably part of it is having worked in a laboratory setting. Like I'm very, and even in surgical units, like I'm so aware and hyper vigilant about being careful. Um, but this is where the right kind of nutraceutical protocols, an
Yes.
anti-inflammatory diet, like all of this is so important to protect the brain and body health. I
Yeah.
feel,
Yeah.
if we've learned nothing from COVID, it's, supplements do work. I know a lot of people, back in the day, people used to say that's expensive urine, right? Nobody ever really wanted to believe nutraceuticals were as powerful as they are. And I've seen it in the clinical setting using brain imaging to show nutraceuticals can be very powerful in helping you to maintain great brain health and body health. And now I think brain health and immunological health go hand in hand.
Yes.
And as I've learned from a mom who's had cancer, right, when your immune system goes down, right, everything is free reign, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it's just, I feel like now, at least sort of on a population level, I think we now all have a greater appreciation of how important it is to take care of our immunological health and our brain health, which makes me happy, not just our cardiovascular health. Because I actually
Yeah.
think I think the cardiovascular surgeons and, I think heart disease and cardiovascular health have always been sort of the number one priority that people have focused on, probably because heart attacks are the number one killer of men in America. So that is smart. But when I think now that we've gone through COVID, immunological health has now ramped up, and I'm actually seeing more people with autoimmune issues. And
Right.
I don't know what is causing that. I don't know if it's just better detection, but I feel like this is now becoming much more of a public health issue. Would you agree? Because I'm seeing it.
Yeah, I think so. There's so many people whose symptomology reverses, disappears during
That's a
the
good part.
simpler health protocols. So, in terms of, I focus my primary foundational focus on health is metabolic, gut, and cognitive. And
Yes.
if what happens if that's not taken care of, then you get these symptoms like weight gain, joint pain, brain fog, lethargy, gut dysbiosis, bloating, etc. And then human beings, we just tolerate that, and
We
we go,
do.
that's just aging or whatever, and
Right.
we buy ourselves off with all the excuses and reasons, and what happens is the longer you leave that, because as you said earlier, if you're fat, the fatter you are and the longer you're fat, the more your brain shrinks.
Inflammation.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then you end up with this diagnosis at some point. The doctor says you've got sort of
Mild cognitive
some
impairment, or
cardiometabolic disease or
right.
osteoarthritis or cancer or early stage dementia or something. And then there's morbidity and mortality. And
Yeah.
so all the focus is up here, and there's all of this that we could actually do something about.
Yes.
You don't numb yourself to the experience, and you let the noise to signal ratio
Yeah.
get out of whack. You're a
Yeah.
great instrument that just needs to be constantly calibrated,
Yes. Oh
right?
my God, you're speaking my language, because I have always said your brain is like an instrument that needs to be tuned. We're
Yes.
always sort of tuning it, and think of it like a Stradivarius violin, right? It's like it's delicate, you want to be very mindful of how you play this. And we're here helping people to fine tune that instrument. But if your metabolic health is impaired, um, metabolic syndrome
And it's
is the fat.
immunometabolic, and your access to that is obviously nutrition, your gut
Yeah,
microbiome, the those bugs in your gut, they make drugs. I mean,
yeah, they
they're,
make drugs.
they're pharmacological
They
machines,
are they are pharmacological machines, drugs, neurotransmitters.
right? So
Yep, it
simpler
keeps
as
the
that
whole
acronym, the science of immunity, metabolism, um, uh, uh, gosh, I can't even simpler performance, longevity, and regeneration. That encompasses my
Oh, I
areas
love
of
it.
interest and expertise, but I like making it simpler. It's not
Yes.
simple.
No.
I make it simpler. And so you do still have to put some intellectual effort in. You got to still do some critical thinking. That's the investment that you must make towards
But
learning more.
it's the change. It's helping people transform their day-to-day behaviors and habits. And you can't go home with them. So, when people go home and they're left to their own refrigerator and their cupboard, which, I used to always teach people, like, we've got to do a whole revamp on the refrigerator. Even my husband in our house, he opens it up and he looks and it's just all fresh fruits and vegetables. And you're trying to find like the quick snack. And I'm like, "Okay, there's some grapes and there's a grapefruit and there's some cantaloupe or some nuts." But it's a whole lifestyle
Yeah.
change.
Yeah.
This is why we need you, because and once people get there, I mean, everybody's happy when they're leaner. Everybody feels good. Ask Antonio with his ripped abs now.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody, like, there isn't anybody who doesn't get excited when they see that slimmer figure and they start to see their abs come out. It's like, yeah, that's not just helping your body and your immune health and your metabolic health and your brain health and your cardiovascular health. I mean, you've literally
I tell
just
you what's more fascinating is that they become calmer. Their decision-making processes are just more empowered and less irritated. And I said to Joe Maroon, I
yeah,
said, here's my theory. When I put them in this very low calorie ketogenic diet, they just seem to be way more responsive to the coaching, and the coaching and the
interesting.
transformations stick. And I suspect the plasticity and the enhanced neurogenesis and it all helps towards that. And he said, Dean, you're absolutely spot on. I just gave a lecture on this. I said, because I can't find any real
Right.
um, literature on supporting my theories here. And he said, no, it's relatively new. I just gave a lecture about it 3 weeks ago. Let me send you the
Wow.
recording. Don't share it because there's some
Yeah.
bullshit stuff in there about what they used to do to help people's brain dysfunctions in the early days, right? And anyway, he said we call it psychosurgery, and they
Yeah.
utilize low dose psilocybin, LSD, CBD
Oh,
together
interesting.
with together with neuromodulatory technologies, what you were
Yeah.
talking about, photobiomodulation therapy, hyperbaric oxygen, transcranial magnetic stimulation, etc., and together with cognitive behavioral therapy. And he said, Dean, you've figured out how to do it just with nutrition and conversation.
Well, and to your point, and I think this is where you and I walk hand in hand. So when I taught brain-directed weight loss groups in a psychiatric center every week for 7 years and have helped thousands of people lose weight, people lose 100 pounds, and I was just like you. It was education, it was daily, or it was weekly accountability.
Yes.
Um, so we used brain imaging as well, so I could tell how your brain is wired, if you're impulsive, compulsive, anxious. um, we would do protocols sort of based on your brain wiring, because those are different kind of eating patterns. So to your point, and people had access to psychiatrists or all of those other therapies, but you don't need hyperbaric oxygen therapy for weight loss. You don't need transcranial magnetic stimulation for weight loss. If you have treatment resistant depression, if you're depressed, you will eat more, right? So there is that connection. But what I love what you do and what I did as well in the clinical setting, every person listening can lose weight. I feel like they just need the right coach to hold their hand. And you're one of those people. I have been one of those people. And when they believe in you and know that we can get the results, and it doesn't have to be hard and it doesn't have to be expensive and
Mm.
it's sustainable. Because for me, it's that whole parable, like, you teach a person to fish, right? You don't just, it's like you teach somebody how to do it, and the transformation process takes time, because you're really, I call it unwinding bad habits that you probably didn't know you had. And I also like to help people find brain healthy upgrades. So I sort of meet them where they're at, and then instead of being very, I don't want to say strict, but I have a way of working with people where you just teach them how to make a better choice. And sometimes, there's still parameters with everything, like you. I trust people are smart, and if they want to be there, they're going to get the result.
Yeah.
All it
Yeah.
takes is an open heart, an open mind, and trust. And so, just like Dr. Maroon was saying about you and your work and your team, like they're gonna invest in you, you will invest in them, and they will get the results. And I've seen your results. I
Yeah.
know Dr. Joe, right? I've
Mind blowing.
seen
Yeah.
I've seen your results are incredible. And I'm
Yeah.
I'm saying this with such respect,
Thank you.
because it is the number one thing I think people should focus on. If you do one thing to take care of your brain health, talk about biohack your brain, and I write about this right throughout my book about the importance of being at a healthy weight. Because if you're at a healthy weight, then I know you're not diabetic and you probably don't have hypertension and you're probably not smoking, like all of the other factors that accelerate your risk factor for dementia. When you get healthy, sort of all of those other bad habits start to fall away, right? It's almost
Yeah.
like you intuitively know, like, I'm going to make better choices all the way around.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really, it's transformational. Talk about
Can I
dividends,
share with
right?
you
Talk
about
about dividends.
can I
Yeah.
share with you about a client that I'm coaching now?
Yes, please.
His health is amazing, and
Tell me.
he's wants to he deals with a stutter, right? So it's like, can I help someone with a stutter? I don't know. Let's just talk. So,
Yes.
and I listen, and then it's like people's brains fall out of their mouths. It's pretty obvious. So what was interesting, and it'll be interesting to hear your take on this,
Yeah.
oops, is when he was talking about the stutter, he wasn't stuttering. So the stuttering, the phenomena, stuttering or stutterer was distinct from, it was dislocated from him when he's talking about it, right?
S-
And there was no stuttering. The only other time he really doesn't stutter is when he's on stage and he's presenting
He's
and
focused.
he's just
He's
out here.
focused.
He's out
Yeah.
here,
I
right?
feel there could be like a subconscious piece to it.
Yeah, so
Number
we're
one.
working on distinguishing how does the world occur
Yeah.
during those moments, distinct from when you are trapped in the stuttering and he's trying to recall some technical details about something. It's the recall. It's not just technical information. It's like names or songs or lyrics. And
Right.
so, we'll do some work on increasing the plasticity in his brain.
Yeah.
And we can do that via nutrition. We can modulate uh, the increase in AD levels. We can increase
So
beta.
has he stuttered his whole life since
Yeah,
he can remember?
yeah. And
Um,
he's
s-
also got eczema,
he's got
right?
what?
Eczema on the
Like
skin.
eczema on his skin.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
detoxification.
that psychoneuroimmunological connection. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think about the immune system with that. The stuttering, I would look at the anxiety centers. I like when he's focused, he doesn't stutter. So he actually has times when his speech is fluid and he's
Mhm.
comfortable and he's in the zone. It's almost like all of his brain power is focused on that. So it's not, it's not maybe in the anxiety centers. I don't know. I'm just sort of thinking off the cuff as you're speaking. I
Yes.
would have him start to track in a journal all of the times when he has not stuttered, because those are signals that he's capable of communicating in a fluid, clear, efficient manner, um, and that this can be extended,
Yeah.
and that there's potential that he can overcome this. And I just sort of intuitively went to maybe subconscious triggers that initiate it, or anxiety, right? Sometimes people have anxious tics or things that they do. And if you calm down the anxiety centers, could do neurofeedback on the brain and see exactly how his brain is wired. But just even if you didn't do that, I'm sort of thinking out loud, that's what I
Yeah.
would do.
Yeah. I
It
mean,
is extraordinary when people focus
yes.
that clear, focused mind, how everything else dissolved. And it's like a tunnel. Even people who struggle with pain issues, it's very interesting if you get them focused on things, focused on a task, how all of the sudden the pain dissipates or they forget that there's pain. Um, so
Yes, exactly. I
and
remember.
again, this could be the insula. I mean, I could start throwing out brain regions that
Yes.
have to do with interoception and self-reflection, but I'm this is why I love meditation, by the way, is a very strategic way for people to learn how to get sort of greater control of their brain and get calmer and balanced. I mean, it's a discipline. If it's a discipline you practice, and something perhaps he could look into because it's a focusing tool. And I'm wondering if he sharpens that focusing tool, if
Yeah.
he won't be more successful. So I'm rooting for him from afar. I would like to have you keep me
He's a
posted.
phenomenon and absolutely
This,
just an amazing contribution to so many people. And this is what's
oh,
brilliant. He just wants to take it to another level.
I love it.
You know,
Well,
and
you're
the
gonna help him. You'll help him take it to
yeah,
another
the
level.
access to the brains, we can make it more malleable through
Yes.
nutrition, and then
Yes.
movement is how we modulate. And so,
Yes.
and then whilst he's doing those exercises, we can get him singing and, start exercising those parts of the brain. And there's enough of it's like clay. You can mold it however
Yes.
which way you want. You just have to know the tools in which you can do that with. So
Well,
that's
and
beauty.
plus it takes, people like us. I mean, I love studying the brain, and I feel like every person's brain is unique. As unique as your thumbprint is your brain print, right? Yes, we all have the same 3 pounds of brain. We all have the Brodmann areas. We all have our corpus callosum and our amygdala and our hippocampus. But the way the brain is connected, the connectome, the interconnections, and how it's the electrical and synaptic activity in the brain that really is the driver of all of our behaviors. Um, so, I mean, we're just on the precipice of using all of these modalities that we have to really, it's a precision medicine and maybe a precision therapy approach, a whole person precision medicine, precision therapy approach. Because I know we keep talking about the brain, but the brain and the body are interconnected, right? Your
That's right.
body tells you something and it gives us a clue about what's going on in your brain and vice versa. So it's endlessly fascinating.
It
It is
is. It
endlessly
is.
fascinating. We have a lot of work to do, don't we?
We do, and we're
We
going to do some
do.
of that work in the new project. Anything you want to share
I
about that?
I am so excited. Oh, you coming on board working with me? I love it. Yes. Well, I have a foundation that is called the Willeumier Center for Advanced Research in Neurotrauma and Brain Rehabilitation. And my love is helping people who struggle with incurable disorders. And most people, have had issues with trauma, whether it's physical or psychological. And I use a form of quantitative EEG guided neurofeedback that can retrain brain networks both at the cortical and subcortical levels. And I've started a center, which you are now going to be a part of because you have graciously accepted to be on the board, where we can do research, longitudinal research studies, just evaluating the efficacy of this technology and helping improve people's quality of life. And it's not just neurotrauma, it's Parkinson's patients, it's Alzheimer's patients. I'm really about how do we help the greatest number of people using the most advanced technologies, and just it's really comes from the heart. I did this because I love the technologies and I adore you and I know how brilliant you are. So sort of collectively we can come together and help hopefully millions of people improve their brain function.
So exciting. It's so exciting.
Yay.
It's my
Thank you.
absolute,
Thank you for letting me share.
it's brilliant, and I love it, and I love you, and I
I
just
love you.
really thank you for the honor and privilege it is to participate and see what I can contribute to that endeavor. and we'll do
Oh,
some exciting things all over the world. Joe's
yes,
collaborating with a group in India. They've developed a magnetic resonance spectroscopy approach to
I
measuring
heard.
metabolites in the brain.
I
So,
heard. I'm excited about that too.
whoop, the puppy, the
Oscar is
puppies
excited as
excited.
well. Yeah, the puppies are very excited.
Yeah. So we'll bring it all together, and then the work that I'm doing in Asia,
Yes,
from a regenerative health perspective, neuro healing centers are a major component of my vision. So, you
I
know,
know. That's why I see all of this working together synergistically between what all of us are doing, and we share and continue to evolve the research, right? The innovative research, and just help, millions of people along the way.
yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. We will do this again, and update everyone on some of the advancements, but just really appreciate you, and
I
have a
appreciate
wonderful,
you.
wonderful holiday season, and we'll speak again very soon.
Dean, you are just an amazing human being. Truly, it is an honor and a pleasure to be your friend, and I'm so excited to see the work that we're going to do together.